Today is June 6, 2014, and we have webinar number WX Live, webinar number 115, and we got Professor Glenn back, and he has some really cool RAD stuff to show us that we've been waiting for a long time to see really happening. So, Glenn, I'm going to let you just get going.
Okay, well,
Unless Tim has something he wants to say before we get started. Tim?
The thing that I would have to say is we're now accepting registrations for this year's WX Live. I'll put a link to the website in the chat, and the kind of training that you'll see today is some of the quality training that you'll see in Atlanta in October, the week of October the 27th. Presenting during that week will be Professor Glenn, Uncle Pete, Cowboy Andy, and Fabrice Harari. And I'll turn it back over to you, Glenn.
okay, well, thanks. I delved into RAD because one of the people in the Skype chat was saying he wanted to delve into it and didn't think it was that difficult. And so I kind of took that as a challenge to get in here. And on its surface, developing the RAD is not that terribly difficult. It's once you get down into any customized coding, and there's just small caveats and things that you have to be concerned about. And not everything is documented in the help, or it's not documented well. Certainly it could be more in detail. The problem with the RAD, from my point of view, is it really is totally a black box without any documentation, or as I said, very little. There are many functions that you call. They're just naming conventions that you have to use. And they really boil down to just a few things. Well, before we get into that, let me just back up just a titch. And I want to show you, because it not only has to do with the RAD patterns we developed here, but where are the RAD patterns themselves? So when you actually generate a RAD pattern, you see them. So that's the first point we'll look at right now, is you'll find them in the WX directory. So for here, I'm doing it in 18. These patterns also work in 19 in the projects. I have 6 RAD projects that are available also, and they're in 18 and 19. So if we go to WINDEV 18 and we go to programs, we go to data, and we go to models, and then we go to RAD, and we go to WD, and then we go to patterns. Here is the location or the repository of all the RAD patterns. And so when you create your own or you modify the ones that I have, you will actually put them in here. So when you run through the RAD process, which we'll do later, these will automatically show up in your environment. So you do not have to import them as such. So this is very important. This is where they actually belong. And in help, they actually list 2 different locations. One is wrong, as you can tell, and the other one is this proper here. Okay, and as you work with RAD, you'll notice when you first create a project, one of the options that they give you is where you can create a WD or a WB project. You can actually create a RAD project. And when you do that, what will happen is they will automatically create this analysis for you. Let me close this here and bring these windows down just a bit. They will create this for you. And this is every conceivable way of linking files together. You've got one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. So this is nice in how they create it for you. And they create the field names with just the keys and the relationships between the different files. And you'll notice that they give it the name of RAD file A, RAD file B, RAD file C, and RAD file D. And then you'll notice the links between them. RAD file A is linked over to RAD file A REL for the relation. So the great thing is they create this for you. You do not have to do anything with this. Well, my question to them was, if they can create the analysis for us, why cannot they create every single form that we would need and just modify those? Well, they don't, unfortunately, at least not yet. Okay, so this is where you start when you create your own RAD patterns. And then what you do is you have to create your forms, your windows for the browse with the table control, for the listing of all your records, and that's what I've done here. And it's important to use the name RAD file A within the name of your window. And then what it will do is it will substitute RAD file A with whatever tables you have in your analysis that you point to. And the same for RAD file B and RAD file C. So let's take a look at what a window with a table control on looks like. Okay, now this is the very simplest RAD pattern. This is based on their 11 RAD that they had, and I've left the naming conventions the same, and in the additional 5 that I've created, I've changed it just a bit, and I'll tell you why. But here, this is just the simplest form that we have. We put a table control out here, and again, we have the name of the table, that RAD file B. If we were working over here in RAD file A, you guessed it, this one is called RAD file A. So you basically have 3 sets of windows, types of windows that you've got here. RAD file A, RAD file B, and RAD file C. And then over here we've got our buttons, and you just put your generic code. And so again, if you're working with RAD file A or RAD file B, you would say hreset RAD file A. And when you actually generate your project based on RAD, it automatically does the substitution for you of RAD file A. You'll also notice down here that I'm going to call my window RAD file A _ U, which is this file over here. Okay, so there's nothing difficult about this. It's really just knowing what the naming conventions are, and then what you need to do when you want to actually do some customized coding, because there are caveats with the coding that you work with. So RAD file A, RAD file B, RAD file C. Let's go to RAD file BU. So we'll do a lookup. We'll do a maintenance form. Okay. The key to a maintenance form is you have to have a super control on the update form. And you have to name it SC_form. Okay. And then you're going to put 3 controls out here. You're going to put a static control, and the naming of this is important. You can see that it is STC IRAD file, ID RAD file B. Okay, and it will substitute then the primary key and put that in here so you can see the value. At least it's on the screen then. Hide it or do away with it. You'd at least have access to that. And then you're going to put a combo box out here. And this combo box represents a lookup. So if you've got a people table and you're looking and you want to have a listing of states, that would be created now for the states. And actually, this will be duplicated for as many times as you have a foreign key pointing to another table. And then you'll create a button next to it. At least I put it next to it. And what that does is, instead of just calling a listing of that, that will actually call your form where you can see the records that you would be working with. And that would be, and if we take a look at it, you can see that we are going to call WinRAD file A_S. So my naming convention here is _B for a browse, _U for an update, and _S for a select. So if we look at this, again, this looks very similar to that first window we were looking at, which was our window with a table control. The biggest difference is we now have a select button. So what PCSoft has chosen to do is use 2 different windows, one for browsing data and one for looking up data. And so one of my next patterns will be is just use one, so we don't have, to me, simpler is the better. The less or the least amount of code that I have to maintain, or the least amount of windows I have to maintain, the better off it is. So I will be also adding new ones for that. So anyway, we go back to the U, and so this is what we put on here. And this will get created or not created as many times as we have foreign keys going to a child table. You'll notice that we also, and again, this is in its simplest form. Okay, so this is the same code that you write if you're not doing classes directly in the windows themselves. And you're saying if rad file B, again, that substitutes. So if this were people, it would say if people.new record is true, hadd rad file B or hmodify rad file B. And then we just have a return value. So again, this is using the standard that PCSoft created, or what they generate from their simplest RAD. Then, so we've got those three types, A, B, and C, or A and B. When we get to C, now what we're doing is we have a relation, actually, I'm sorry, because we have A, B, and C. And quite frankly, with all the different ways that I've been generating my application against an analysis, all I ever see is the RAD file B being generated. I have not had a RAD file A or a RAD file C being generated, so I don't know when they get generated. I'm still going through the RAD trying to figure out what's happening, since not everything is well documented. Now, as an aside, so I know where the form's being created from. You'll notice, and this only shows up in the IDE when you're running. This one, you'll see it's got a RAD file B identifier, just so I know that it was generated from here, right? Just as this one would have a RAD file A, because I'm still trying to trace things through to see where they're coming from. We've got a pretty good handle on it. So then what we do is, when we have many-to-many relationships, is we create a relationship kind of a window here, okay? And then these buttons will call the forms, and actually these buttons will be created as many times as you have relationships, okay? And again, you've got a super control on here, and that's the key, is you have to have super controls, and that's when it gets populated. Now, these super control names are not documented in there, and so I've been working with Jerome a little bit of PCSoft, and he gave me a tip of some control names, so I'm working on those and adding more functionality. But these are my first take on this. So here's your Win relations, and you'll notice when we look at this that it's got col ID, rad file C REL, and the B REL, and so these will automatically, where the IRAD file C, that will also be substituted with the proper name of the field that it's being linked to. So all this happens for us automatically. Now, one of the things that I was looking at and struggling at, because I just didn't see the name of the reports in there so easily, is you create a report for each table that you have. You create a details report, where it's a listing of that. And then we create a table type report. And so one will be called from a maintenance form. That is the details, I believe. And then the table gets called from your window that's got the browsing of the records in here. So that's what it takes for the RAD. And believe me, this has taken me polishing it and getting it ready with the other 5 patterns that I have has probably taken me close to 6 or 8 weeks of 40 hours a week just working through the different issues. Let me take one of the RAD patterns that I have, and we'll step through generating the RAD pattern itself and talk a little bit about that, because there are some options in there. Okay, so let's just close this all. Okay, 1, 2. I want to go to 6. This is the one with all the features. and we will generate from here. Let me show you first what I've added in here. What I've done is I've taken that very first one that you looked at here, and I've added functionality as we go along. So if any of you have taken my class, or classes, or purchased the training material, you'll know that we have some things in there that relate to CRUD templates and business rules. And so what I've done is one of the RAD patterns is based on CRUD templates. So you have all your CRUD functionality, create, read, update, delete, and then the validate, all based in one control template. So you don't have to write that or have it created on every single screen. You just put a control template on there. And I'm going to liken a control template that you put on every screen visual OOP. I know it's not, but just humor me in that you get to inherit it on every single screen. And if you make changes in the template itself, it automatically gets updated then on all of the windows. And so that's one of the RAD patterns that I have. I also have another RAD pattern. If you've ever done some work with saving a record and somebody saved a copy of it just before you do, you know how you get that dialogue that comes up and says, hey, we've got a problem here and you need to rectify it. Well, I've got another way that I think is a little cleaner. It actually pops a table up, shows you what fields have been changed on a record that just before you did your save, and it gives you the option on a field by field basis of overwriting or keeping that data. Then also, if you've taken my classes and you've seen we've implemented business rules, I have a pattern that implements business rules, as well as the query by example, where I've gotten tired of writing those for each screen. I just create a QBE. And then the last one is the full features. And that's what we're going to look at here. We'll generate it, and then we'll see how it works. So you need to generate a RAD pattern pretty much the same way that you create an executable. What we do is it's located over here on the left-hand side, generate the RAD pattern from the project. So we'll do that. Let's check this out. Okay, so you give it a name and then you give it a caption, okay? And the name is the physical name of the file that you'll see on the disk that you'll actually copy over to that folder that we saw this morning. And this is what you'll see when you actually go to run a RAD or use a RAD. And then we can increment the pattern version just like we do with EXEs. We can, by default, and here we're looking at by default, we generate all the windows for the project when you're generating a full RAD. That's what's in the second column here on the right-hand side. However, in this case, these are the ones you don't want to generate. So I left them all deselected. That way it will generate every single page for a complete RAD. And then you can specify which files or which windows do I want to be able to generate on a one-off basis. That way you don't have to generate a complete project. We step through this and include preset files. This is nice if you need to include any type of file with your project. Mine, I'm happening to include my business rules hyperfile classic files with this, which brings up an interesting point. You can't put your own table definitions in the analysis for the RAD pattern and expect to be able to use it in the generated application. Even though you can include it here, it says just bring it along with the project when you generate it, and it will actually be put in the exe folder. It's that users don't have any use of that hyperfile table as such, so you have to code around that. Okay, so I said I want to include those, and here you can yes, apply the skin template to the client project to the generated elements. In other words, when you're going to actually RAD an application, what I'm letting the end user do is supply their own or select a skin template. If I said no, then however I have my skin templates defined within the RAD pattern, that's what you would be using. But I let you select your own. Okay. And then what do you want to do with the tables? Do you want to make them so they cannot be editable? Or do you want to be able to use the default that you've set up within your RAD pattern itself? Okay. Whether we want to include the question mark, the help menu, and I'm saying no in here, but you can see yes, well, we can do that. We can do the images and what sizes they're going to be. We can actually supply a logo that will show up. So let's see if I can find, maybe that's not a good time to do this. Let's say Dropbox. New logo. I won't grab that. That will actually show up in your RAD pattern when you go to create it. Okay, so now we're going to check out the elements. Okay, it's checking all these out. So one of the things I had just mentioned is with the files that you're able to take over. You say, yes, include these preset files with that. What I needed to do was for my business rules is I needed to have two tables that I wanted to be able to use and access it as if I had included them in the analysis. So I had two choices of doing that. I could have the end user, the people who purchase the RAD patterns, just bring that into the analysis, or, and I chose not to do that, or I could actually code around that and treat it as an external file. So that's what I chose to do. Because what's really neat is when you bring something in as an external file, whether it is Hyperfile or it could be SQL Server, it doesn't matter. It reads the structure of that and it treats it just as if it were in the analysis. And in fact, if you do an HList item, an HList file, you'll actually have it as if it appeared in the analysis. So it's really great in that once you reference that, you can reference all the fields of that table just as you had included it in the analysis. Okay. So what we had just done now was create that pattern. And so what we would do is we would copy it from, let's go here, my projects, and this is RAD Patterns. See RAD Patterns 18, go to 6, we'll go to EXE, and here's where we would have our RAD pattern that was just created. And so we would copy this. Within that RAD pattern, these tables are in that pattern. So all I have to do is copy RAD pattern 6, okay, and as I had said, that is over here in WINDEV 18, Programs, Data, Models, RAD, WD, Patterns. I would copy it in here, and you'll notice there aren't any data files here, it's just a pattern. So that's kind of nice how they do that. So we've now taken a RAD pattern, whether it's a basic one or whatever you've done for enhancing these or creating your own, and we've copied it to the RAD pattern. So now when we go here, let's do a new, we'll do a new project. Don't check in right now. And we'll create a new project and we'll call this my test 6. Let's do my test 61. 6A. And I know I've got a one I'm creating. Okay. So this very beginning is just done as you do for any WD application. We're going just through how we want to do this. Now, I'm not going to put it in SCM for right now, but the one thing here is we have programming with a charter, and this is one of those caveats that I found out about working with the RAD patterns is I suggest creating your RAD patterns without using a charter, and also do not prefix variables or controls with what the pattern, with what the charter might use. And the reason is this: if you create, let's say it's a button, and you give it the prefix of btn underscore and then the name, btn underscore button 1. Well, when you actually go to RAD an application and you say use the charter, what it will do is it will put another btn in front of it. So you will have btn underscore button 1. Okay? So that's why I say not to use it, because then if you RAD an application and it doesn't have the charter, and you say use a charter, it will put the btn underscore in there properly. Or if you say don't use the charter, it will just be the name of the control as you created that. And that becomes really important once you start referencing the name of a control in custom coding. So if you had it named btn underscore button 1, and then you say use a charter when you RAD your application, so it puts in the second btn, it does not update your code for that. So your code will be referencing a control that doesn't exist. Okay? Now, in that same vein, it has to do with global variables. And so this is a good reason not to use global variables if you can get away from that. And that happens to be is if you create your global variable, and we'll say without a prefix or without a charter, and then you go to RAD your application and you say, yes, I'm going to use a charter. What it will do is every place in the application except where you declared the global variable in the project code, it will put a prefix, but it does not put the prefix in the project code area for that. So again, you have mismatched variables. So yeah, it's an easy fix just to go in and put that prefix in then in the project code, but that's the one step that I just didn't want to have to do. So I've coded around this. So even if there's some type of variables and things that I need to do, what I'll do, and it's just a good programming practice rather than rely on the global variables, is pass them from form to form. And when you're creating your RAD, that's so easy to do. So when it generates the code, it just works perfectly. Okay, so right now we will use a programming charter. Okay, and I'm just going to use the defaults for most of these. We'll use English. I'm not going to use the did you know. I'm going to use an existing database, and we'll grab that from Dropbox, sample analysis, and we'll grab this. Okay, so now that has nothing to do with RAD up to this point. Now we're going to use our full application of RAD, and where I showed you we put those RAD patterns, that's just what you're seeing here. These are the ones that I've created. Okay, so let's go and do the simple RAD with all features. And these are all the files that I have in my, or tables that I have in my analysis. Okay. Okay. And it's just going out there and it's going to generate every single one for us. Okay, so if we take a look at this, here's all the windows that it just created. So now just imagine if you had your own RAD patterns with everything coded the way that you like it to work. And it's always error-free. Well, you know what? All your programs are going to be always error-free. They're going to have your code in there. And so when you go to your client and you say, well, I estimated it would take 15 days for this project, and you know what? There's enough code in here that it took me these 15 days to create this, but at least you're not writing it every single time. So let's go and let's just take a look. See if I can get this up here. There aren't any errors that are generated. At least it doesn't see any right now. Let's run this. See if we get it to run. Now, this is my applications with what I've done through the training through the years with the CRUD I'm not sure if I got the CRUD templates, but it's got the business rules and it's got the consistency check in here and it's got the query by example. So let's go take a look at the people table. And here's my QBE, but for right now, we're just going to say return all records. So you'll notice that we've got blue fields in here that are highlighted because my business rules say if it matches some criteria, and it's probably where it's at, the person has SQL, make it blue. Let's go modify that record. Here's my modification form for this, okay? And again, this is my business rules with these different colored fields saying these fields are required. And again, as you saw, I didn't write one single line of custom code to get this done, okay? Now, I'm going to try one thing here, and I say try. I've already loaded Kevin Murphy in here, and I'm going to be acting just as if somebody would have changed the code, the record behind the scenes on me just before I did a save. And let's make this Murphy 1, 2, 3. Say okay. Okay, so now this comes up and it shows me, hey, I have a data issue here. This record was changed and the original value was Murphy. It was changed to YYY and my values is 1, 2, 3. What do I want to do with this? Well, anyway, I'm just showing you what you can put in RAD patterns. So I'm going to say save using my check values. And now you can see that it saved that record. Also, to the QBE, if I want to select a person's name, I'm not sure if I'm in there or not, execute that. We find the record. Again, none of this code, do I have to write anymore because I get tired of writing the code, put it in the patterns, and it works well. So let's look at, oh, one more thing, business rules. So this is how you actually do your business rules. We will edit a business rule. And you select a table from your analysis, you select a field, you select what kind of rule you want it to be, and you can add these because these are just records or templates. And I've also finally implemented the business rules for fields as well as for controls. And so I've got one on a table control, and we'll edit this. This is how I now go and say these are the values. If a particular row in a table control matches some value, go ahead and do whatever my code happens to be. So those of you who've seen the business rules, you know that if you have one application and you have a subscription for many clients using that same application, you now can have different business rules for different people. Or if you've got a client that they're always wanting to have some business rule changed and it's a major headache to go get it approved, you have to go through some committee or some approval process because the application's changed, guess what? You probably don't have to do that because you can just make the change in the database. Okay? And as you see that we have all these other tables created and windows created for us without writing any code. Let's quickly take a look at some of these windows, because you had seen how the window was actually created in the first place. When we looked at RAD file B_B, we had a table up there. I don't think it had any columns, but we named it that RAD file B. And so this is what it created for us. Okay, automatically put those out there because that's what I have in my analysis. We look at the code, and this substituted the RAD file B when it went out and looked at my analysis, which, by the way, this is my analysis here. Okay, so I've got a people to a prefix. We've got people to widgets. So we've got a many-to-many, and we can people and phones. We have a many-to-many. All right. So that original analysis that we looked at in the RAD pattern RAD file A, RAD file B, C, and D. It actually goes out and it figures out what these relationships are here, how it needs to generate those tables or those windows for you based on the name of those tables. Okay. So let's go back here. You'll notice that we also have the icons in here. I had selected icons when I created the RAD pattern, but when you select a skin, it will put the appropriate one in there that you choose. Now if we go and we're going to modify a record again, okay, check to see if something's been selected. And again, if you don't like the way that I've coded this or how you're doing it, go ahead and code your own. Let's go look at people U. This is the maintenance form. You'll notice that we have these fields here, and they are automatically linked already back through the analysis. If we look at the code, this is the code that's generated. And you'll notice that because I've added functionality in here, I have, for my data consistency, I actually have a function that I've called, or a procedure, and I pass parameters to it. And this was actually in the RAD pattern, it was RAD file B dot RAD file B ID. So it knows then to substitute that actual field name in there. And then I put name at the end, so it grabs the name instead of putting it within double quotes. Okay. Let's see what else is an interesting thing in here. Oh, yeah, one more thing. Let's go back and look at RAD B, the QBE, and these are the fields that we have to use for calling our QBE. But again, since I put them in the RAD patterns, you don't have to code these. When we had implemented these in the first training classes, actually up until RAD patterns, we had to actually fill in each of these values. And it was not a big deal. It's just that that was extra code that we had to write. And then on the QBE, and so now you'll see, and we can look at that on the RAD pattern. We have, let's see where that's at now. Oh, I've named these with SDC so they stay together, but here's our SDC, oh, sorry, wrong one anyway. Query by example. So this is the QBE window that you saw. So you can create your own windows and include them in your RAD pattern. So let's go back and let's actually just take a look at that. So we'll go back and look at your, as we load this up. And again, when I'm saying before, when I mentioned when you create your variables and your control names, do not give them the prefixes. You'll notice that I don't have win RAD file A underscore B in here. And in my own windows, it's business rules. Again, I don't put the win in here because if you say to use a charter, it will put the win in there. And if you choose not to, it won't put it in there. Now, here's another thing that I'm just thinking of. When you create, let's go to the main menu. When you create your main menu for the application, you just put in one reference, RAD file A, and it will automatically create as many menu entries as you need for each of your tables for doing your maintenance or your browser, your entry points, okay? Then you go ahead and you put in your menu items for the windows that you want to open. And easy enough. So now if we look at the code for here, open RAD file A underscore B. And so it will automatically do, the next one is RAD file B underscore B, and however many that you need, excuse me. And then you code yours over here like we normally would, right? You just go ahead and open that. Now, what I found is if you want to open up a window, and particularly my example was the data changes, you cannot just call the window, because if you say to use a win prefix, a charter in here, and it puts win in front of it, it does not generate or substitute that code correctly. So I would always get an error. So what I had to do, and I guess there's other ways around this. I guess I could put that as a menu choice and make it invisible, and I'll look at that. But what I had to do, I took the long way around this, is I knew what my window name was, and then all I did was use enumeration and go through the project to say, hey, do I have a window of this name? Well, the caveat with that is you can't interrogate window names unless they're open. But I found, and I'm thinking, well, they do in groupware. So you can actually enumerate it and then use a GPW constant in there, and it will say, okay, here's the windows I have in my project, even if they're not open. So I was able to code around that. Okay. So anyway, what I'm getting to here is you can include any of your windows that you want, and it will get created in your application. Now, one would think, at least I thought, hey, wouldn't it be nice if I could actually create my own queries that I wanted to use, because I want to base my windows on a query as opposed to an H filter. Whatever queries you make in the project tree, so that'd be under here, they do not get created in your RAD pattern. Now, I'm guessing if you'd make a query as a source in the table itself, it would be created okay, because it's actually in that form that's being created, but I chose not to do that. But anyway, with my paradigm here, with the QBE and the code that's behind the window, in fact, let's go look at, let's close this one more time, or let's look at RAD file B underscore browse, since we're looking at the RAD pattern. And what I do is I just create my my H filters here in the initialization. And again, this will automatically be substituted with the proper name when it gets RAD generated. Okay. That's the bulk of the RAD patterns. There are a few things, so let me find that document to go over them point by point if possible. The first thing is that location of where you put the patterns, okay? Now, as I had said before, do not using a program charter in the RAD pattern, and do not put a prefix in front of it that would be used by the RAD pattern. Refrain from using global variables in the project code. And the reason, again, is wherever you use it within your application and you choose to use a charter, it will create that, it will apply the charter to those global variable uses, references, but it will not change it in the project code itself. So you'll have a mismatch there. Simple enough to fix, just go add the prefix. Okay. Invisible fields do not get generated in Windows for RAD file A, RAD file B, and RAD file C. Okay. And code in events of controls that you've got on your window, such as the static or those combo boxes, such as you would have code on the row select or whenever modified or whatever that is, that does not get generated in your application. Do not call a window whose name contains RAD file A, RAD file B, or RAD file C from a procedure. It does not get generated properly. If you must call a window from a procedure, take a look at the RAD pattern for data consistency that we just talked about. I'm finding RAD patterns, they're creatures all by themselves. They have many nuances, and I'm sure there's still a whole bunch of things I'm not even aware of, but I've really had a fun time, tedious at times, hair-pulling at times, trying to figure out what the heck is happening or not happening, especially when you go to generate a RAD pattern and it gets 80% through and it just dies on you. Okay? Fortunately, that's not happening anymore, but I never could find out. I'd have to back step one step, one step, one step. It's just that this totally is a black box without much documentation. So that's really the bulk of my talk. And so if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer those, or try and answer them.
So, any questions? Write it out or raise your hand and we can put your mic on. Man, that's a lot of work you put in there, Glenn.
Boy, yeah. Tell me, especially with, you know, with 6, because not only do I have the 6 patterns, but I had to go back and generate them both using a charter and not a charter, and there were differences on how they got generated. So I finally worked those things out. So I don't want to make this a total sales call, but I do have these available, and they're on the website. My thought is at least it gives you a basic starting point, even for your own patterns, or take the ones that I have, because I can't see why somebody wouldn't want to use RAD if you can write your own code. Now,
because you can always override it, right?
Oh yeah, you can always override it. Just comment it out and write your own. Or in the case of even my business, my CRUD templates, I let you override procedures in there, just like we were able to do with embed points and Clarion as such. We have all these virtual procedures. Now, I will tell you, I tried creating RAD patterns based on OOP. Now, all you guys hold down your laughter because you know I'm not into OOP. But I had an example in front of me doing that. And what I was finding was a couple things. It was not generating class names properly. It would not substitute them properly, or whatever I needed to do. And what I found was in version 11 of WINDEV, they actually generated classes. And so I figured, okay, I'm going to use that. So that's what I did. And it just would not, I could not reverse engineer it enough. Well, I could reverse engineer it. I couldn't get it to work using with the code that they had. And when you actually create an update form, you're actually having to have that in fact, let's go over here. You actually go to your maintenance form, and you'll notice that the super control that I told you about is actually in the RAD tab here. It tells you what your browsed file is. So you cannot do a variable. Now, if you could do a variable, that would be great, because how we're doing things with arrays and structures, that would really be dynamite, but they don't have that yet. However, I know Andy's talked with them, and I've mentioned that to them, so hopefully that they will implement this in the future. Now, I know there's ways around this. We could actually have it pointed to the name of the table still, and then have your variable then substituted at runtime. Not a clean way of doing it, but I think there's ways around this, but I'm hoping they're going to come out with this. Okay, so yeah, any questions?
I don't see any questions yet. But why don't you show your website where you can get to it, just so that
Okay.
you can see, they can see that.
Yeah, and actually for the next week, I've got this on. It's www.wxtraining.us or .net. Either one takes you there. And first of all, we've got the information here on RAD patterns, the different patterns that we have. And then when you purchase training at the very top, WD RAD patterns, they're normally $199 at this point, but they're on sale for $149, and you get all 6 patterns. So I just don't want to.
Well, that's great. I mean, the time you spent in there, if any one of us had to go through what you just did, that's worth the time.
One of my next things that I want to do is I want to create a RAD pattern that will consume web services, because I'm just working on another application that I've been able to hook up to my generic web services and leverage that. And it just makes things a lot easier. So if we can put that in the pattern and you say, here's the web service, consume it, and off you go. So that's the next on my list to look at.
So this is good through the 13th. Okay.
Yes.
Super.
So either everybody's glassy-eyed because I confuse them so much, or there's...
I think the people that are used to seeing Clarion two-way template stuff working, this is like the closest thing to that. So,
yeah, and hopefully, because I know Andy's had a conversation with them of being able to have a template language and fill prompts in for that. So hopefully they would bite on that and do something. That would really be dynamite.
yeah.
Can I just jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Wolfgang.
I started with this template or the stuff, and I'll tell you what, and I think you, Glenn, you're making it sound easy, but I've been pulling my hair out, and I'm listening to you now. I think, why didn't I think of that kind of thing? But I'll tell you what, there's so many nuances which you gave today. It's just kind of like, oh, bugger me, that's why. And every time you say the next sentence, I think, why didn't I see it? You know, but maybe because I was pushed for time and I wasn't looking at it all properly. But I'll tell you what, I'm amazed what you got done. Really nice. It answered a lot of my questions, put it that way. And
good
stuff.
Yeah, like he said, lots of it's not documented, so he had to dive deep into. I just remember the process he was going through, and he says, "You got to see this, Arnold." I go, "Show it to me."
Yeah, a couple times a day. Won't believe what I found.
No,
so
I can say that too, because when I started with it, you really kind of pull your hair out, but when you figure a piece out, and you say, "Wow, this is great stuff," you know what I mean? And also when you're playing first, I don't know if you picked it up, Glenn. There was quite a few variations of this RAD templates, and only one of them is really what I see you've also started using it. The others are more like just styling kind of thing, note coding.
That's exactly right.
Wastes your time a lot of trying to figure out what's the difference between a lot, and then you find that you could turf all the others out and just look at the one. You know what I mean?
Right. If you remember when we generated the RAD pattern, one of the things in there was, do you allow somebody to select their own skin or just the one that you have? So all that they've done is they put a skin in there on top of their same coding. They say, this is the template. We don't allow you to change it.
Yeah. And it's all those little things. And that's why I say, when you played around with it, a lot of them is like not really coding it. It's just more a skinning effect. And then they named it the RAD, which is not really, my terms, RAD. RAD is more if you got code behind it and something is happening. It actually makes an application, adding records and changing it. So I don't know how many RADs is there, I can't remember, but it was 5 or 6 of them, and I ended up generating them all just to find that it was disappointing. It's more just skinning the application. Because I found the one is actually got the code. So you spend 2 days just trying to figure this out. And you haven't got anything done yet. So I think what you're charging is peanuts compared to what you spent on it.
And you know when you work with the RAD patterns on the surface, it seems simple. I mean, you certainly got these generated in the beginning, and then all of a sudden when you start putting in your custom coding and all of a sudden things aren't referenced properly, that, you know, as President Reagan used to say, the devil's in the details. Everything's the details.
Yes. And that's why every time you were saying something, I said, damn, why didn't I see it before? And I'm like, I'm kind of frustrated. I haven't seen it, you know. But I suppose because you spend 2 hours here and 2 hours there, and you don't really keep hammering at it. And, it sounds like you've been hammering it well away on it.
I've been hammering on this for quite a while now,
Yeah, I've seen it.
Let me quickly just show you the one thing, because that's what I really find cool in here is, again, you'll notice that these are control templates. So I just put it on my RAD forms. And so now when you actually, you know, I mean, it's just so simple now, because now over here's where my code exists in one place, period.
Yeah. I didn't think of doing that. I ended up putting it in each place, but this even makes it more nice.
Yeah, well, you know, it depends, because if you put it in each place, at least you're not writing it. Yes, you have to maintain it, but it's really easy to go ahead and override or completely change what you want to do on there.
Yeah.
Regardless. I mean, there's just many ways of doing this. Yeah. So anyway, it's been fun doing this, although at times it's been so frustrating. Once, you know, one step forward, two steps back, and then again, you know, and all of a sudden a big giant leap. But anyway, my plans in the future with RAD patterns will keep on extending these if I can, if I get suggestions, or like I had said though, with consuming web service if possible. I would like to also make these in WB. I don't know when, but that's on my list. And I would also like to make them for WM. And what I've also found, which is nice, is I took my patterns from that folder that I showed you, and I copied them over to my 19 folder, and then they generated applications just the same way, which is really nice. And which, by the way, the projects are, like I had said before, available in 18 and 19 now.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So if you've been lagging behind and you just wanted to gen an app, here it is.
That's right. Yep.
There's your
And I'll look like a hero.
No, that's XYZ templates. That's the end of this one. All the other arguments about templates.
Yeah. Yep.
The other start, we end.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there you go.
So Wolfgang, I know you can appreciate what he just did. So
I'm telling you, I'm very super excited about this. I tell you, it's like, you know, I kind of want to kick myself now that I didn't keep going at it, but okay, there we go. There you go.
No, you were waiting for Glenn to do it, because I remember like two years ago.
Don't tell it too loud. Don't tell it too loud.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If there's no other questions, Chris with the glassy eye, well, here it is. Just, I guess we can call it a wrap unless there's any other questions. But this is the closest thing for a clearing guy to kind of get in here and gen stuff and still have your virtual methods, your embed points to do your thing, you know.
Right. Yep. Well,
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to show this to you. So.
Well, thank you for doing it, and thank you for your effort for doing it, because it was like a sleeping giant just sitting there. I remember 2-3 years ago when you and I were talking, I says, "But where's my templates?"
No.
Well, here it is, baby.
Yep. Well, way back when, it was not documented well at all, but barely documented. Now they have a little more, but it's still, you know.
Well, you remember everybody was just kind of like genning it and said, well, don't really use it because it kind of tells you, it kind of does it, but it really doesn't. So you got to go start from scratch anyway. This way you can kind of tweak it to your style and use everything that you basically have taught us over the years, like in your examples like that right there, or your business rules, or all of that stuff. You integrate it in, so fantastic.
And I'll tell you what, this template is much more easy to write than other templates.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't understand.
Well,
why do you need? Why do you need a template language per se then?
Yeah.
Well, because it would be because it would be nice if you could make something conditional. I can't. I would say if this, then do that when you're generating it.
Oh, kind of like we can check. Yeah, okay, got it. So that's the next step, eh? Yeah.
Well, it's up to them. They've got to implement that.
Otherwise, you got to make another RAD item to choose rather than another one or something like that.
Right.
Well, that'd be a little tricky. That's a little tricky though.
Alternatively, you have to do it in the code what you've got.
Is there user options in this thing that you could? No, I guess you couldn't because you don't have conditional anyway. Okay.
Well, what I had done is I had many features put in, and then I would wrap around that feature a variable, a value, and then you could just set it on the form itself, whether you want to use that.
Ah.
Like a quite, so yes or no kind of.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we could do that.
Ah, so you just, but you have to go in there and check on and off, which is fine because it's sitting there, right? It's not going to be overwritten if you change
Correct.
your RAD templates.
Correct. It's just your application. Yeah.
It's a flag for a specific procedure to use something or not use something.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. I mean, that's as close as you're going to get, man.
Right now. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So, big claps, man. Great job.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
That's
Don't give
fine.
up. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye now.